The glint of midday sun caught on Penelope Walker's wedding band as the stagecoach rattled over the uneven terrain of Colorado Territory, 1875. Her stomach churned with each jolt and bump, though it wasn't the rough journey causing her distress, but the destination that awaited. 3 weeks of travel from Boston had given her ample time to question her decision, to wonder if the man who'd sent for her would be pleased with what he saw or if disappointment would cloud his eyes. The coach slowed as it approached the small town of Silver Creek. Penelope smoothed her travel-worn skirts and adjusted her bonnet, knowing full well no amount of primping would erase the exhaustion of her journey or the dust that clung to every inch of her. Silver Creek. "End of the line, folks," the driver called out. Penelope gathered her courage along with her small valise. She was the mail-order bride of a man she'd never met, arriving in a town where she knew not a soul. Their correspondence over the past 6 months had been formal, practical, and arrangement of convenience. Garrett Hayes needed a wife to help run his ranch, and she needed escape from a life that had become unbearable after her parents' deaths and her brother's gambling debts threatened to force her into an unwanted marriage to her father's business partner. As she stepped down from the coach, her legs trembled beneath her. The street was dusty, lined with wooden buildings weathered by sun and wind. Men in wide-brimmed hats and women in practical frontier dresses moved about their business. Penelope stood alone, unsure where to go or who to look for. "Miss Walker." She turned at the deep voice behind her. A tall man stood there, his broad shoulders blocking the sun. His face was partially shadowed by his hat, but she could see a strong jaw dusted with stubble. When he tilted his head, she caught sight of eyes the color of a summer sky. "Mrs. Hayes, actually," she corrected, lifting her chin slightly. "I believe you're my husband." The man stepped closer, and for the first time, she saw his full face. Handsome wasn't quite the word. His features were too rugged, too shaped by sun and hard work for such a delicate description. His nose had been broken at some point, and lines creased the corners of his eyes. But when he smiled, something inside her shifted. "Garrett Hayes," he confirmed, removing his hat. "I apologize for not being able to meet you at your arrival time yesterday. I hope you weren't waiting long at the hotel." Penelope's brow furrowed. "Yesterday? But I've only just arrived." Confusion crossed his face. The stagecoach was due in yesterday afternoon. "There was a delay, a broken wheel near Denver," she explained. "I haven't been waiting anywhere." He frowned. "Then where are your trunks? Surely you brought more than just that valise." Penelope's cheeks burned with humiliation. "My brother's debts were substantial. I sold most of my possessions to clear his name before leaving Boston. This is all I have." She saw the flicker of disappointment in his eyes, exactly what she'd feared. She wasn't what he had expected, not wealthy, not properly outfitted. Just a desperate woman fleeing one bad situation for what might be another. "I understand if this changes things," she said stiffly. "Our arrangement was based on certain expectations. If you wish to reconsider, reconsider." Garrett interrupted, his brow furrowing. Then his expression softened, and a slow smile spread across his face. "You're already mine, Mrs. Hayes. Our vows were exchanged by proxy the moment you signed those papers back in Boston." His words weren't romantic, yet something in his voice made her heart beat faster. He extended his hand to take her valise, and when their fingers brushed, an unexpected warmth spread through her. "Welcome to Silver Creek," he said. "Let's get you home." Home. Such a simple word, yet so foreign to her now. Penelope followed him to a wagon parked nearby, her mind swirling with relief and apprehension in equal measure. The ride to the Hayes Ranch took nearly an hour, during which Garrett pointed out landmarks and explained the boundaries of his property. Penelope tried to concentrate, to memorize the information he provided, but exhaustion pulled at her eyelids. "You can rest," he said, noticing her struggle. It's been a long journey. I'm fine, she insisted, straightening her posture. Please continue. He gave her a sidelong glance but respected her wishes. The ranch has been in my family for 20 years. My father claimed the land after the war, built it from nothing. When he passed 3 years ago, it came to me. I'm sorry for your loss, she said softly. Thank you. His hands tightened on the reins. My mother followed him 6 months later. Some say from a broken heart, though the doctor called it pneumonia. Penelope's own grief for her parents was still raw. I understand. I lost both my parents last winter. Influenza. They fell into silence then, a shared understanding of loss passing between them. When they crested a hill, Garrett pulled the wagon to a stop. There it is, he said, pointing to the valley below. Hayes Ranch. The sight took her breath away. A large 2-story house stood proudly against the backdrop of mountains, with several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn nearby. Cattle dotted the green pastures, and a creek wound through the property like a silver ribbon. It's beautiful, she whispered. Garrett's expression was unreadable. It's not Boston. No, she agreed. It's better. His eyes widened slightly at her response, and for the first time, she saw something other than polite restraint in his gaze, a flicker of hope, perhaps. As they approached the house, a woman emerged onto the porch. She was in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair and a sturdy build. That's Mrs. Abernathy, Garrett explained. She's been keeping house since my mother died. She'll help you settle in. Penelope nodded, suddenly nervous about meeting the first person who would judge her adequacy as Garrett's wife. When they reached the house, Garrett helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and sure at her waist. The brief contact sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. Martha, Garrett called to the housekeeper. This is my wife, Penelope. Mrs. Abernathy's shrewd eyes assessed Penelope from head to toe. Welcome, Mrs. Hayes. We'd almost given up on you arriving. The stagecoach was delayed, Garrett explained before Penelope could respond. And Mrs. Hayes must be exhausted. Perhaps you could show her to her room while I see to the horses. Of course, Mrs. Abernathy replied. This way, madam. Penelope followed the housekeeper inside, taking in the surprisingly comfortable interior. The furniture was sturdy rather than fashionable, but the rooms were clean and well kept. Fresh wildflowers sat in a vase on the dining table, and colorful quilts hung over the backs of chairs. Your room is upstairs, Mrs. Abernathy said, leading the way. Mr. Hayes had it prepared special for your arrival. The bedroom was larger than Penelope had expected, with a wide bed covered in a handmade quilt, a wardrobe, and a dressing table with a mirror. A door led to what appeared to be a connecting room. That's Mr. Hayes's room, Mrs. Abernathy explained, following her gaze. He thought you might want your privacy at first, but the door's there when you're ready. Penelope's cheeks warmed at the implication. Of course, she knew what was expected in a marriage, but the reality of sharing such intimacy with a stranger suddenly loomed large. I've drawn water for a bath, Mrs. Abernathy continued. It's waiting in the washroom down the hall. Dinner will be at 6. Thank you, Penelope managed. When the housekeeper left, she sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the reality of her new life. After bathing and changing into the only dress she had that wasn't travel-worn, Penelope made her way downstairs. She found Garrett in what appeared to be a study, poring over ledgers at a desk. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment he simply stared. She'd let her dark hair down from its severe traveling style, and it now hung in loose waves past her shoulders. You look, he began, then seemed to lose his words. Presentable, I hope, she offered, self-consciously smoothing her skirts. Beautiful, he finished, rising from his chair. I hope you found everything to your satisfaction upstairs? Yes, thank you. The room is lovely. An awkward silence fell between them. There were so many things they didn't know about each other. So many questions she wanted to ask. Why did you choose me? She blurted out. From all the responses you must have received. Garrett seemed surprised by her directness. Your letter was honest. You didn't try to paint yourself as something you weren't. You spoke of wanting a partnership, not just security. He hesitated, then added, and there was something in your handwriting, a steadiness that spoke to me. It wasn't a romantic answer, but it was thoughtful, and she appreciated his candor. I hope I won't disappoint you, she said softly. I think that's my line, he replied with a slight smile. I'm just a rancher, Penelope. My hands are rough, my manners rougher. I can't offer you the refinements of Boston. I didn't come here seeking refinement, she assured him. I came seeking a new beginning. Something shifted in his eyes then, a softening she hadn't seen before. Then we have that in common, at least. Dinner was a quiet affair, with Mrs. Abernathy serving before retiring to her quarters in a small cabin behind the main house. Penelope and Garrett ate mostly in silence, stealing glances at each other when they thought the other wasn't looking. I should warn you, Garrett said as they finished their meal, that the ranch hands will be curious about you. They've never seen me with a woman before. Never? She couldn't help asking. A faint color touched his cheeks. There was someone once, years ago. It didn't work out. She wanted to ask more but sensed his reluctance to elaborate. Instead, she asked about the ranch, and his face lit up as he described the cattle operation, the breeding program he'd implemented, and his plans for expansion. I'm boring you, he said suddenly, noticing her stifled yawn. Not at all, she protested. I'm just tired from traveling. Of course. He stood and offered his hand. Let me escort you upstairs. The walk to her bedroom door felt fraught with unspoken expectations. When they reached it, Garrett cleared his throat. I'll be up later. Don't feel obligated to. That is, I understand if you need time. Penelope's heart hammered in her chest. Thank you for your consideration. He nodded, then hesitated before leaning down to press a gentle kiss to her cheek. Good night, Penelope. She watched him walk away, her fingers touching the spot where his lips had been. Perhaps this arrangement would work after all. The next morning, Penelope woke early, determined to prove her worth. She dressed in her simplest gown and made her way to the kitchen, where Mrs. Abernathy was already preparing breakfast. I'd like to help, Penelope announced. The housekeeper raised an eyebrow. Can you cook? I can learn, she replied with more confidence than she felt. To her surprise, Mrs. Abernathy smiled. That's the right answer, Mrs. Hayes. Come, I'll show you how we do things here. By the time Garrett came in from his morning chores, Penelope had managed to help prepare a respectable breakfast of biscuits, eggs, and bacon without burning anything too badly. The look of surprise on his face when he saw her working alongside Mrs. Abernathy was worth the flour that dusted her sleeves. You didn't have to do this, he said as she poured him coffee. I want to earn my keep, she replied simply. You're my wife, not my servant. I'm your partner, she corrected. Or at least I hope to be. Something flickered in his eyes, respect, perhaps, or appreciation. I'd like that. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Penelope learned the workings of the ranch household from Mrs. Abernathy, who proved to be a patient teacher despite her gruff exterior. She met the ranch hands, who tipped their hats respectfully and called her Madame, with barely concealed curiosity. She explored the house and grounds, finding places where she could imagine making improvements. And each evening, she dined with Garrett, learning pieces of his story, how he'd fought briefly in the final days of the war as a boy of 16, how he'd worked alongside his father to build the ranch into one of the most prosperous in the territory, how he dreamed of creating something that would last beyond his lifetime. They still maintained separate bedrooms, though the connecting door remained a constant reminder of what remained unconsummated between them. Penelope found herself watching his hands as he worked, wondering how they would feel against her skin. She caught him looking at her sometimes with a heat that made her breath catch. A week after her arrival, Garrett announced they would be attending a social at the town church. "It's time people met you properly," he explained. "There's been talk." "What kind of talk?" she asked, alarmed. His mouth quirked. "Nothing scandalous. Just curiosity. It's not every day a confirmed bachelor like me takes a wife." The prospect of facing the town's scrutiny filled her with dread, but she knew it was inevitable. "I don't have anything suitable to wear," she admitted. "My good dresses were among the things I sold." "I thought that might be the case." Garrett reached into his desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you. Consider it a wedding gift." Inside was money, more than she'd seen since her parents' deaths. "Garrett, I can't." "You can," he interrupted gently. "My wife should have nice things." The pride in his voice when he said, "my wife," sent warmth spreading through her chest. Perhaps this was more than an arrangement of convenience for him too. The day before the social, Garrett drove Penelope into town to visit the dressmaker. The woman, Mrs. Chun, was a Chinese immigrant who had settled in Silver Creek with her husband after working on the railroads. "Mrs. Hayes needs a dress for tomorrow's social," Garrett explained, "and perhaps a few everyday dresses as well." Mrs. Chun smiled. "I have just the thing. I can alter one of my ready-made dresses for tomorrow, and we can discuss custom pieces for later." While Penelope was being fitted, Garrett excused himself to handle some business. When he returned an hour later, she had selected fabric for 3 everyday dresses and 1 special occasion gown. Mrs. Chun had promised to have the altered dress ready by morning. "You look pleased," he commented as they drove back to the ranch. "I am," she admitted. "It feels good to have something new." She hesitated, then added, "Thank you, Garrett, for everything." He glanced at her, his eyes softening. "You're welcome, Penelope." That night, as she prepared for bed, a knock came at the connecting door. Her heart leapt to her throat. "Yes?" she called. "May I come in?" Garrett's voice was low. She adjusted her nightgown, ensuring she was decent. "Of course." He entered, still fully dressed though he'd removed his boots. In his hands he held a small wooden box. "I wanted to give you this," he said, extending it to her. "It was my mother's." Penelope opened the box to find a delicate silver pendant on a chain. "Garrett, it's beautiful." "It's a lily," he explained. "My father gave it to her when they first came west. Said it reminded him that beauty can bloom anywhere." He cleared his throat. "I thought you might wear it tomorrow." "I would be honored," she whispered, touched by the gesture. He stepped closer, taking the necklace from the box. "May I?" She nodded, turning so he could fasten it around her neck. His fingers were warm against her skin, and she could feel his breath on her hair. When the clasp was secured, his hands lingered on her shoulders. "Penelope," he murmured, his voice rough. She turned to face him, finding his gaze intense. "Yes." For a moment, she thought he might kiss her properly, but instead, he stepped back. "I should let you rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." Disappointment flooded her, though she tried to hide it. "Good night, Garrett." "Good night." He retreated to his room, closing the door behind him. Penelope touched the pendant at her throat, wondering if she'd imagined the desire in his eyes, or if he was simply being a gentleman, giving her time to adjust to their marriage. Either way, she was beginning to wish he wouldn't. The town social was held in the church meeting hall, decorated with paper streamers and wildflowers. It seemed half the county had turned out, eager to meet Garrett Hayes's mail-order bride. Penelope felt their curious stares as she entered on her husband's arm, wearing the blue dress Mrs. Chan had altered and the silver lily pendant. "You look beautiful," Garrett murmured as they crossed the threshold. "Every man here will envy me tonight." His words gave her confidence as he introduced her to what felt like an endless parade of neighbors, merchants, and ranchers. Most were welcoming, though some of the women eyed her with thinly veiled suspicion. "Don't mind Mrs. Packard," Garrett whispered after a particularly frosty introduction. "She had hopes of matching me with her daughter." "And you weren't interested?" Penelope asked, curiosity getting the better of her. His expression turned serious. "I never considered anyone local. Too many complications if things didn't work out." "Is that why you sent for a bride?" "To avoid complications." Before he could answer, they were interrupted by the arrival of the town sheriff, a weathered man named John Baker. "Hayes," the sheriff greeted with a nod. "This must be the missus we've been hearing about." "Sheriff Baker, my wife Penelope," Garrett introduced them. The sheriff tipped his hat. "Madam, welcome to Silver Creek." His expression turned serious. "Hayes, I need a word. Privately." Garrett frowned but nodded. "Excuse us, Penelope. I'll be right back." She watched as the two men moved to a corner of the room, their expressions grave. Whatever they were discussing, it clearly wasn't good news. When Garrett returned, his jaw was tight with tension. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing for you to worry about," he replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Would you like to dance? The music's starting." She allowed him to lead her to the dance floor, where other couples were already gathering. When he took her in his arms, she felt a thrill run through her at the press of his hand against her back. "You dance well," she commented as he guided her through the steps. "My mother insisted I learn," he replied, relaxing slightly. "Said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like a bull in a china shop." Penelope laughed, delighted by this glimpse into his upbringing. "She sounds like a formidable woman." "She was," he agreed, his eyes softening at the memory. "You would have liked her, and she would have approved of you." "How can you be sure?" His gaze met hers, sincere and direct. "Because you're strong. You faced adversity in Boston, and instead of breaking, you found a way forward. That's the kind of spirit that built this place." His words warmed her more than any compliment about her appearance could have. "Thank you," she said softly. They danced until the music ended, and Garrett reluctantly released her. "I need to speak with a few of the ranchers," he explained. "Will you be all right on your own for a bit?" "Of course," she assured him. "I'm not completely helpless, you know." He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "I never thought you were." As he moved away, Penelope found herself approached by a group of women who introduced themselves as wives of neighboring ranchers. Their questions were polite but probing. How had she met Garrett? What was her background? How was she finding ranch life? She answered as honestly as she could without revealing the more desperate circumstances of her departure from Boston. "Mail-order marriages can be difficult," said one woman, Mrs. Lawson. "My sister came west that way. Took her nearly a year before she felt at home." "I'm adjusting," Penelope replied. "Garrett has been very patient." Mrs. Lawson exchanged glances with the others. "He's a good man, Hayes. One of the best in the territory. But he's been alone a long time." "What Mrs. Lawson is trying to say," interjected another woman, "is that Garrett Hayes has ghosts. We all wondered if he'd ever marry after what happened with Rebecca." Penelope's chest tightened. "Rebecca?" The women fell silent, exchanging uncomfortable glances. "I'm sorry," said Mrs. Lawson. We assumed you knew. Knew what? Penelope pressed. Before anyone could answer, Garrett reappeared at her side. Ladies, he greeted them, his tone pleasant but his eyes wary. I hope you're not overwhelming my wife with local gossip. Just getting acquainted, Mrs. Lawson replied smoothly. Your Penelope is a delight, Garrett. You're a fortunate man. I know it, he agreed, placing a hand at the small of Penelope's back. If you'll excuse us, I believe this next dance is ours. As he led her away, Penelope couldn't shake the unsettled feeling the women's words had left her with. Garrett, who is Rebecca? His step faltered slightly. Someone from my past. It's not important now. It seems important enough that the entire town knows about her, Penelope persisted. If we're to be partners, I should know these things. Garrett's expression closed. Not here, Penelope. Not tonight. The ride home was silent. The evening's earlier warmth dissipated. Penelope's mind raced with questions. Who was Rebecca? What had happened between her and Garrett? And why did everyone seem to think it was significant enough to mention? When they reached the ranch, Garrett helped her down from the wagon, his touch impersonal. I need to check on something in the barn, he said. Don't wait up. Hurt by his dismissal, Penelope went inside. Mrs. Abernathy had left a lamp burning but had retired for the night. The house felt emptier than it had before, now that she knew there were secrets between them. Unable to sleep, she made her way to the kitchen and put on water for tea. As she waited for it to boil, she heard the front door open and close, followed by Garrett's heavy footsteps. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, surprise crossing his face. You're still up. I couldn't sleep, she replied, not meeting his eyes. Would you like some tea? He hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. They sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from their cups in the silence between them. I'm sorry, Garrett finally said. I shouldn't have shut you out like that. Penelope looked up, finding his expression contrite. Who was she, Garrett? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Rebecca Miller. We were engaged 7 years ago. What happened? There was an outbreak of typhoid fever. It hit hard and fast. His voice grew distant with memory. Rebecca fell ill 3 weeks before our wedding. She didn't survive. Penelope's heart ached for him. I'm so sorry. For a long time, I couldn't imagine being with anyone else, he continued. Threw myself into the ranch, built it up into something my father would have been proud of. But the house felt empty. I realized I didn't want to spend the rest of my life alone. So you sent for a bride, she said softly. He nodded. I didn't expect to feel anything beyond companionship. I thought that would be enough. And now? She asked, hardly daring to breathe. Garrett reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Now I find myself thinking about you when you're not in the room, wondering what you're doing, what you're thinking. I find myself wanting more than just a practical arrangement. Her heart hammered in her chest. I want more too, she admitted. He stood, pulling her gently to her feet and into his arms. I think I started falling for you the moment you stepped off that stagecoach, looking so brave and determined despite everything. I was terrified, she confessed. I thought you'd take one look at me and regret your decision. Never, he murmured, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. You're everything I never knew I wanted, Penelope Hayes. When his lips finally met hers, it felt like coming home. His kiss was gentle at first, then deeper as she responded with enthusiasm. His arms tightened around her, and she pressed herself against the solid warmth of his chest. Penelope, he breathed against her mouth. My wife. The possessive note in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. Take me upstairs, Garrett, she whispered. Please. He needed no further invitation. Sweeping her into his arms, he carried her up the stairs to his bedroom, their bedroom now, and laid her gently on the bed. "Are you sure?" he asked, his eyes dark with desire but his voice controlled. In answer, she reached for him, pulling him down beside her. "I've never been more certain of anything." That night, their marriage truly began. The next morning, Penelope woke to find Garrett watching her, a soft smile on his lips. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes." She blushed, remembering the intimacies they'd shared. "Good morning." He traced a finger along her cheek. "No regrets." "None," she assured him. "And you?" "Only that we waited so long," he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. They might have lingered in bed longer, but a commotion outside drew their attention. Garrett rose quickly, pulling on his clothes. "Stay here," he instructed, his expression suddenly serious. "What is it?" she asked, alarmed by the change in his demeanor. "I'm not sure," he replied, though something in his voice told her he had suspicions. "Just stay inside until I come back." From the window, Penelope watched as Garrett strode toward a group of his ranch hands gathered near the barn. Among them was Sheriff Baker, looking grim. Their conversation was too distant to hear, but she could see the tension in Garrett's posture. Unable to contain her curiosity and concern, she dressed quickly and made her way downstairs. Mrs. Abernathy was in the kitchen, her face tight with worry. "What's happening?" Penelope asked. The housekeeper hesitated. "Cattle rustlers, most likely. They hit the Anderson place last night. Sheriff thinks they might come here next. Why didn't Garrett tell me?" "He didn't want to worry you," Mrs. Abernathy replied. "He's been tracking their movements for weeks now, ever since they started operating in the territory." "Is that what the sheriff wanted to discuss at the social?" The older woman nodded. "Mr. Hayes has been helping organize the ranchers to defend their herds. He's well respected, they listen to him." Penelope felt a surge of pride, followed quickly by fear. "Is he in danger?" Before Mrs. Abernathy could answer, the door opened, and Garrett entered, his expression grim. "Rustlers hit the Anderson place last night," he confirmed. "Took 20 head and shot one of their hands who tried to stop them." "Will he survive?" Penelope asked. "Doc thinks so." Garrett ran a hand through his hair. "Sheriff's organizing a posse. I need to ride with them." Fear clutched at Penelope's heart. "These men are killers, Garrett. All the more reason to stop them before they hit another ranch." He crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "I'll be careful, I promise. But I have to do this." She wanted to protest, to beg him to stay, but she knew it would be futile. This was who he was, a man who stood up for what was right, who protected his community. It was part of why she was falling in love with him. "When do you leave?" she asked instead. "Within the hour," he replied. "We want to catch their trail while it's fresh." "Then I'll pack you some food," she said, squeezing his hands before releasing them. As she worked alongside Mrs. Abernathy to prepare provisions, Garrett gathered his gear. When he was ready to depart, he pulled Penelope aside for a private farewell. "I'll be back as soon as I can," he promised, cupping her face in his hands. 3 days at most." "I'll hold you to that," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "The ranch and I will be waiting." He kissed her then, a deep, passionate kiss that left her breathless. "I love you, Penelope Hayes," he whispered against her lips. "I should have said it last night, but I was a coward." Joy bloomed in her chest despite her fears. "I love you too, Garrett. Come home to me." With one last kiss, he mounted his horse and rode out with the sheriff and 4 other men. Penelope watched until they disappeared from sight, then turned back to the house. If Garrett could be brave, so could she. The next 3 days were the longest of Penelope's life. She threw herself into ranch work, learning as much as she could from Mrs. Abernathy and the remaining hands. She practiced with the rifle Garrett had shown her how to use, determined to be able to defend the ranch if necessary. At night, she slept in their bed, clutching his pillow for comfort. On the morning of the fourth day, with still no sign of the posse's return, Penelope was hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Her heart leapt with hope, only to falter when she saw it was a lone rider, not Garrett but one of the men who had ridden out with him. "Mrs. Hayes," he called, dismounting quickly. "Sheriff sent me ahead. They're bringing Mr. Hayes home." Her blood ran cold. "Is he?" "He's alive," the man assured her quickly. "Took a bullet in the shoulder. Doc's with him. They'll be here within the hour." Relief made her knees weak. "What happened?" "We caught up to the rustlers near the pass. There was a gunfight. Mr. Hayes got one of them, but another circled around behind. Would have been worse if the sheriff hadn't got a shot off when he did." "And the rustlers?" "2 dead, 3 in custody. Won't be bothering anyone for a long time." Penelope nodded, trying to process everything. "Thank you for riding ahead. I'll have a bed ready." The next hour was a flurry of activity as she and Mrs. Abernathy prepared for Garrett's arrival. When the wagon finally pulled into the yard, Penelope was waiting on the porch, her heart in her throat. Sheriff Baker jumped down first, then helped the doctor support Garrett as he climbed stiffly from the wagon. His left arm was in a sling, his face pale beneath his tan, but he was upright and walking. Penelope rushed to his side. "You promised 3 days," she said, tears threatening despite her attempt at lightness. "I'm only a little late," he replied, managing a weak smile. "And I brought you a gift." "A gift? Peace of mind," he said. "Those rustlers won't be threatening our home anymore." "Our home?" The words warmed her despite her worry. "Let's get you inside. You need rest." The doctor insisted on examining Garrett's wound once he was settled in bed. "The bullet went clean through," he reported. "No sign of infection. He'll need to rest that arm for a few weeks, but he should make a full recovery." "I'll make sure he follows orders," Penelope promised. When they were finally alone, she sat beside him on the bed, gently stroking his hair back from his forehead. "You scared me," she admitted. "I scared myself," he confessed. "All I could think about when that bullet hit was that I might never see you again. Never hold you again." He captured her hand with his good one. "I meant what I said before I left, Penelope. I love you." "I love you too," she whispered, leaning down to press her lips to his. "Rest now. I'll be here when you wake." In the weeks that followed, as spring gave way to summer, Penelope nursed Garrett back to health. Their bond deepened with each passing day, their initial arrangement of convenience blossoming into a love neither had expected to find. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Garrett took her hand in his. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Coming west to marry a stranger?" Penelope considered the question, thinking of all that had happened since she stepped off that stagecoach. "Not for a moment," she replied honestly. "I came expecting rejection, prepared to be a disappointment. Instead, I found a home. I found love." Garrett smiled, the expression transforming his rugged features. "I remember the first thing I thought when I saw you. She looks terrified, but she's still standing tall." "I was terrified," she admitted with a laugh. "And then you smiled and said, 'You're already mine,'" he finished. "I didn't realize then how true those words would become, not just on paper, but in every way that matters." He pulled her into his arms, her back against his chest as they watched the colors fade from the sky. The Hayes ranch stretched before them, cattle grazing peacefully in the distance, the promise of their future together written across the land. "You know," Penelope said softly, "I've been meaning to tell you something." "What's that?" he asked, his breath warm against her hair. She guided his hand to rest against her stomach. In about 7 months, there will be 3 of us at the Hayes Ranch. Garrett went still behind her, then turned her in his arms to face him. A baby? He whispered, his voice thick with emotion. We're having a baby? She nodded, tears of happiness filling her eyes at the wonder on his face. Are you pleased? In answer, he lifted her off her feet and spun her around, his laughter echoing across the yard. Pleased? Penelope, you've made me the happiest man in the territory. When he set her down, his expression grew serious. I promise you, our child will know nothing but love and security. This ranch, everything I've built, it's all for our family now. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Penelope leaned into her husband's embrace, marveling at how far she had come from that frightened woman on the stagecoach. She had arrived expecting rejection but had found acceptance, partnership, and love instead. The life she and Garrett were building together wasn't the one she had imagined in Boston, but it was infinitely better, a life of purpose, passion, and promise, stretching before them like the endless western sky.